Hey guys, tonight we wander back through time, way back to the glowing heart of medieval England, where the scent of crushed meadow herbs and wood smoke drifts through the evening air. Picture this: a field alive with lanterns swinging from willow poles, ribbons flickering like tiny flames, and music curling from a cracked fiddle. You're about to walk straight into a wedding feast, one that feels half religious ritual, half carnival chaos. You probably won't survive the meat-to-bread ratio, but at least you'll go down smiling. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there, because tonight, the stars above our meadow are keeping time for all of us. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step onto the grass, damp and cool beneath your boots. The year might be somewhere around 1385, or maybe it's 1420. No one's entirely sure because the people here measure time in harvests and holy days, not numbers. The village sits on the shoulder of a gentle hill, thatched cottages crouched low, as if listening to the laughter swelling from the meadow below. You can almost taste the bread baking in the communal oven, and hear the distant clang of a blacksmith finishing the last horseshoe before joining the revels. At the heart of it all stands a circle of torches marking what the locals call the Garden of Vows. Don't expect roses or manicured hedges. It's really just a patch of trampled grass scattered with herbs and flowers the children gathered earlier that morning. Lavender for devotion, thyme for courage, and a few sprigs of marjoram for joy. Someone added nettles too, though nobody can remember why. Historians still argue whether this garden was symbolic of paradise or simply a convenient way to mask the smell of livestock from the adjoining pasture. Either way, it works. You breathe in sweetness, not manure. The air hums with expectation. This is no private affair. Weddings here are public business. The entire village has turned out, miller, reeve, monk, and milkmaid alike, each clutching a jug, a loaf, or a scrap of gossip. The bride and groom stand in the middle of the meadow, holding hands so tightly you can see their knuckles whitening in the torchlight. She's wearing a dress the color of unspun wool, stitched with ribbons gifted by her friends, while his tunic is freshly scrubbed, though you suspect his mother did most of the work. Someone bangs a drum. Another starts singing in a language you barely recognize, a jumble of Middle English and Latin phrases that make promises sound like spells. The rhythm is contagious. Before you know it, your foot's tapping along. You drift closer. The local priest, half sober, half saintly, begins the blessing. His voice rises above the fiddle, and you can tell he's done this many times before. He doesn't read from a book, parchment's far too precious for that, but recites from memory. By word and will before God and neighbor, he says, let this union stand. There's a pause, just long enough for a child to sneeze, and everyone laughs softly. The blessing ends, and suddenly the mood shifts. Music bursts forth again, sharper now, faster. A row of boys hoists torches high, illuminating long wooden tables already sagging under the weight of roasted pork, honey cakes, and pitchers of ale. A pack of dogs circles, tails wagging, hopping for a dropped crust. You find yourself standing near the baker's stall. She's busy handing out loaves shaped like knots and hearts. For luck, she says, pressing one into your hand. The crust is crisp and warm, and when you break it, steam spills out carrying the scent of cloves. It's the medieval version of a wedding favor, and possibly the most practical one you'll ever get. Somewhere to your left, an old man tunes a lute. His fingers move slowly, gnarled as oak branches, but when he begins to play, the notes are smooth and sure. He sings about lovers who met at a well and swore their hearts with garlands of ivy. The song's older than anyone present, older, maybe, than the church itself, and yet it still fits this night like a glove. A girl passes by with a jug of mead. You take a cautious sip. It's sweet and slightly smoky, with a sting that hits your nose before your tongue. Careful, she warns with a grin. That's last year's brew, strong enough to make the priest dance. You laugh, and then immediately see the priest actually dancing with two nuns in training, both red-faced from the same mead. It's easy to forget, amid all the laughter, that weddings in medieval England were not just celebrations. They were binding legal events. To say the wrong words in the wrong place could invalidate the whole thing. The church tried to regulate marriage from the 12th century onward, insisting that vows be made in public and before witnesses. But here in this meadow, where parchment is scarce and Latin even scarcer, the ceremony feels older, almost pagan in its simplicity. Some scholars claim these open-air hand-fastings survived well into the 1500s. Others argue they were outlawed much earlier. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in the mud between history and memory. You wander among the guests, eavesdropping shamelessly. Two women are arguing over whether the bride's dowry included a cow or just a promise of one. A boy chases a chicken that escaped the kitchen. A minstrel improvises a rhyme comparing love to spilled ale, messy, sticky, but impossible to waste. The bride's grandmother, sitting on a stool by the fire, catches your eye. "They say," she murmurs, "that if you touch the wedding fire with your shoe, you'll find your true love within the year." You glance down at your dusty boots, then at the blaze. Why not? You edge closer, touch the toe lightly to a glowing ember, and pretend not to notice the approving nod she gives you. Later, as the sky deepens to indigo, a pair of musicians begins a slow tune. The crowd thins to the edge of the torchlight, leaving a wide circle of packed earth. The bride and groom step forward, bowing awkwardly, then begin to dance. It's not elegant, more hopping than gliding, but it's joyful. Each turn of their feet kicks up dust that glimmers in the firelight. When the song ends, they bow again, cheeks flushed. The cheering could probably be heard all the way to Canterbury. You lean against a tree and let your eyes wander upward. The stars are bright tonight, bright enough to trace the outlines of forgotten constellations. Somewhere far beyond this meadow, knights are fighting wars, kings are scheming, and monks are illuminating manuscripts. But none of that matters here. Tonight belongs to bread and laughter, to dancing feet and whispered vows. You overhear the blacksmith making a toast. He lifts a mug the size of a helmet and declares, "May their roof leak only when the barley's ripe, and may their arguments end before the stew cools." Everyone roars approval. You can't help smiling. It's better than any Hallmark card. Nearby, a group of children starts chasing one another with flower crowns, pretending to be angels. One small boy trips, sending petals scattering across the firelight. The bride notices, scoops up a handful, and tosses them over the groom's head. The gesture looks spontaneous, but it's rooted in a custom that goes back centuries. Petals symbolized fertility, though villagers would never say it aloud. They'd simply laugh and say, "For luck." The night deepens. The mead grows warmer, the laughter softer. Some guests begin to drift home, others curl up near the fire. The musicians shift to gentler tunes, ballads about saints and lost loves. You find yourself thinking how familiar it all feels, even across 600 years. The faces, the voices, the jokes, they could belong to your own neighbors if you squinted a little. And maybe that's the point. For all its mud and superstition, the medieval wedding feast isn't so different from modern celebrations. The food might have changed, the language too, but the heart of it, the need to gather, to witness, to bless, remains the same. You close your eyes and listen to the sounds fading one by one. The crackle of the fire, the soft snoring of a drunk uncle, the sigh of wind through tall grass. Somewhere a nightingale begins to sing, and it feels as though the whole meadow is breathing with you, slow, content, timeless. Tomorrow there will be new chores, debts to settle, cows to milk. But for this one night, under the lanterns and the stars, the village remembers how to celebrate love as if it were a miracle worth retelling. And maybe it is. You step back toward the shadowed edge of the meadow, carrying with you the smell of bread and thyme. Behind you, laughter ripples again, lighter this time, drifting like smoke into the darkness. The meadow still hums faintly behind you when morning begins to stain the sky with a silvery blue. You've barely slept. There was too much mead, too many stories whispered under the stars. But the day doesn't wait for anyone, not even newlyweds. The roosters scream their victory cry over dawn, and the village shakes itself awake. You follow the faint sound of voices toward the manor yard, where two families, one from the next parish over, stand facing each other like rival chess teams about to make their first move. This is the bargain hour. Beneath the laughter and the garlands, every medieval marriage hides a contract waiting to be settled. The bride's father clears his throat, a sound that could probably frighten a fox back into its burrow. He's a broad man with soil under his fingernails, a small patch of land to his name, and a strong conviction that his daughter's future depends on today's negotiation. The groom's father, leaner, wearing a cap that once belonged to his own father, nods gravely. Between them stands the village reeve, acting as witness and referee. You sense the tension, as if invisible coins clink in the air. They speak in short, clipped phrases. The groom's family offers a small chest of coins, 2 sacks of grain, and the promise of a piglet come spring. The bride's father counters. Her dowry includes a spinning wheel, a patch of flaxfield, and, he adds proudly, her mother's silver belt. Both men nod, each pretending they got the better deal. Somewhere behind them, the mothers exchange looks that say, men will always think they did this themselves. You notice the bride standing nearby, face calm but eyes alert. She's not entirely voiceless here. Contrary to the myth, medieval women did sometimes have a say, especially in small communities where reputation mattered as much as coin. But her opinion comes last, after the ledger's balance. In truth, love may have whispered the match into being, yet it's property and inheritance that give it permission to stand. Historians still argue whether marriages like this were more economic alliances than personal choices. Some claim affection often followed practicality. Others believe that even in these arranged unions, there were sparks of quiet rebellion, moments when two people decided to love each other in spite of the math. Maybe both are true. You look at the bride again. She glances toward her new husband, and though it's only for a heartbeat, something soft passes between them. The reeve draws up a small document, a miracle of parchment and ink. The ink smells sharp, like iron and vinegar. He writes in a practiced scrawl that looks halfway between a prayer and a curse. When he's done, the groom presses his thumb into a bowl of soot mixed with honey and leaves his mark beside his father's name. The bride does the same. It's a messy, sticky business, romance by way of smudge. But in that single gesture, she becomes legally bound, her property folded into his. You might want to groan at that. But before you judge too harshly, remember, for many medieval women, marriage also offered stability in a world that didn't exactly hand out independence like sweets. A widow could inherit. A wife could manage a household business. A well-matched couple could actually thrive. Still, freedom was often a luxury measured in how lenient your husband's temper ran, or how far your mother-in-law lived. The families clasp hands, sealing the agreement. The gesture isn't just politeness. It's called a handfast, and it carries sacred weight. Even if no priest were present, that clasp before witnesses could make a union binding. Later, the church would fret over such informal arrangements, issuing decrees and demanding bans to regulate who could marry whom. But here in this yard, beneath the pale morning light, the clasp itself feels older than any rule, like a memory passed down from before England was even England. The crowd thins as villagers drift away to chores. The newlyweds remain surrounded by a few elders who can't resist giving advice. Never let the fire go out, says one. Never sleep with your feet pointing toward the door, says another. The groom listens politely, nodding at every superstition as though collecting blessings. You drift toward a nearby barn drawn by a curious sound, a rhythmic thumping followed by laughter. Peering through a crack, you see a group of young men repairing a wooden chest. They're hammering it back together after last night's revelers tried to use it as a makeshift stage. "This'll hold her dowry proper now," one of them jokes. Another adds, "Aye, or hide the first baby when she gets tired of visitors." They all howl with laughter, unaware of how close they are to historical irony. Such chests really did serve as baby cradles in poorer homes. A woman joins them, older, sharp-eyed, with a scarf wound tight against the breeze. She's the local midwife, though people also whisper that she knows herbs too well. She leans on her broom and mutters, "May the bargain bring peace, else the garden of vows turns to weeds." The men go quiet for a moment. In a world so bound by contracts, her words cut like a warning. Love ignored too long becomes a curse of its own. The sun climbs higher. You follow the wedding party as they move toward the churchyard for the official blessing. Bells toll faintly, their sound carrying across the fields. On the path, children scatter petals from last night's garlands. A stray dog trots alongside, hopeful for scraps. At the church gate, the priest greets them with a smile that doesn't quite hide his hangover. "God bless your bargain," he says, "and may you pay your tithes promptly." You can't help but grin. Medieval clergy were practical like that. The priest then turns serious, lifting his hand in blessing as he recites familiar words. The Latin drifts over the crowd, incomprehensible but somehow comforting. It's strange. There's no grand procession, no stained glass glow or organ thunder. Just a muddy yard, a few carved stones, and a sky full of crows. Yet the moment feels monumental. This is how most marriages truly began, not in splendor but in the simple act of public witness. You step closer, noting how the couple stands side by side. He grips her hand, not gently but firmly, as if afraid that if he lets go, the deal might unravel. She doesn't flinch. When the priest declares them bound, there's no kiss. That's a later invention. Instead, their hands remain linked, fingers pressed until circulation gives out. Then, without ceremony, the crowd bursts into applause and whoops. Someone tosses grain over their heads, a symbol of prosperity. A boy immediately dives for the fallen grains, shouting that he'll plant them to grow wedding wheat. Everyone laughs, but you can tell the gesture matters. Every fragment of ritual here, no matter how small, carries centuries of meaning. As the group disperses, you catch snippets of conversation about the future. Harvests, weathered debts, and, yes, the inevitable question of when the first child will come. The couple's faces flush, though neither answers. Privacy, you realize, is the rarest luxury of all in this world. By midday, the bride's mother invites you inside their cottage. The air smells of peat smoke and lavender. She's preparing a meal for the returning guests, a stew so thick you could probably thatch a roof with it. While stirring, she talks about her own wedding 30 years ago. "We had no priest," she says. "Just his father and mine, a fire and a promise. Still married, still shouting." She laughs, and you find yourself laughing too. She points to a small carved spoon hanging near the hearth. "That's my wedding spoon," she says. "He made it for me when he had no coin, said I'd never go hungry." It's a touching relic, proof that affection and practicality weren't always enemies. Outside, the newlyweds walk the lane together, trailed by children throwing petals again. They look tired but content. The bride slips her hand into her husband's arm. For a moment, the world around them blurs into sunlight and laughter. You could swear the air itself softens. And yet, even in that tenderness, the weight of the bargain remains. Their futures are now intertwined not just by affection but by property, kinship, and obligation. They'll share the same roof, the same debts, the same harvest hopes. Whether love deepens or dwindles, the deal stands. A century from now, England will change, laws, faith, and fortunes shifting like tides. But for now, here in this tiny parish, the Garden of Vows thrives on its own strange mixture of romance and accountancy. You leave them standing there, framed by the church door and the glint of late morning light, wondering whether the balance they've struck will hold through the seasons to come. As you walk away, the smell of stew follows you, mingled with the faint clang of the church bell. Somewhere behind you, another rooster crows, oblivious, triumphant, and possibly drunk on leftover grain. The day stretches golden and drowsy as the sun drifts westward, and you follow the trail of laughter and footsteps back toward the cottages, where something quieter, yet somehow more intimate, is unfolding. After the public vows and the bargain sealed before witnesses, the village now turns its attention to the tokens. Rings, ribbons, charms, tiny symbols that hold enormous weight in a world where every promise needs a physical anchor. The bride's new home sits just beyond the green, its door newly garlanded with hawthorn and rosemary. You step inside, blinking as your eyes adjust to the dim glow. The air smells of beeswax and thyme. In the corner, a low table has been transformed into a kind of altar, laid with small treasures, each with a story. There's the ring, of course. It's not gold, too costly for most villagers, but bronze, polished until it shines like firelight. The blacksmith crafted it last week, whispering a short charm over the anvil so that no crack shall split this circle. You run a finger over it and imagine the hours he spent hammering it into perfection. Rings have a curious history here. They're not yet the universal sign of marriage they'll become centuries later, but they already carry layers of meaning. Some scholars argue that the circular shape symbolizes eternity. Others say it's simply a practical loop that won't get lost easily. Either way, when the groom slips it onto her finger later tonight, it will seal not just a promise but an identity. Beside it lies a tiny pouch tied with red thread. The bride's mother placed it there at dawn. Inside are a few dried herbs, yarrow, sage, and a single clove of garlic. For luck, she said. But you know luck in this age is a complicated thing. Superstition is the glue of daily life, and garlic wards off not just evil spirits but nosy neighbors and suspicious in-laws. You could say it's the medieval version of good boundaries. And then there's the garland, an intricate ring of ivy and wheat, worn during the feast and now laid reverently on the table. Ivy for fidelity, wheat for fertility. You sense the symbolic pressure tucked neatly between those leaves, to be faithful, to bear children, to keep the house and hearth alive. Love here isn't private, it's the foundation of a whole village's survival. The bride appears, her hair loose now, freed from its ceremonial braid. She looks younger without the veil, almost like a girl again, though the weight of expectation sits gently on her shoulders. She catches you watching and smiles faintly. They say if I sleep with this garland under my pillow, she says, I'll dream of our future home. She laughs, soft and shy, and you realize she's repeating a custom half for tradition, half for comfort. Historians still argue whether these bridal tokens were pagan holdovers or early Christian reinterpretations. The truth is probably both. Like most things that survive centuries, the church, in its wisdom, preferred to reinterpret rather than erase. So herbs once sacred to forest spirits became blessings of St. Anne, and ribbons once tied for luck became symbols of divine grace. It's an ongoing dance between faith and folklore, one that gives this world its peculiar charm. As afternoon shadows lengthen, visitors drift in and out, bringing gifts. One woman carries a spindle wrapped in red yarn, practical and poetic. So she'll never be idle, she says. Another offers a loaf shaped like a dove, its wings scored into the crust. The bride thanks each person with a smile that grows slightly tighter as the pile of expectations grows taller. You notice a small mirror hanging by the bed, a rarity in this time. The surface is polished metal, not glass, but clear enough to catch reflections. Mirrors are expensive and slightly scandalous. They tempt vanity, the priests warn. Yet brides often receive them as if to say, may you never forget who you were before you became someone's wife. You wonder if she understands that message, or if she simply admires the way her face glimmers in it, framed by candlelight and uncertainty. As dusk creeps in, a new kind of ritual begins, the unbinding. The older women, led by the bride's mother and aunt, gather around her to undo the last traces of her maidenhood. They unbraid her hair, each taking a turn to comb it slowly, murmuring blessings and half-forgotten rhymes. The sound is rhythmic, almost hypnotic, like waves on the shore. Tame the tangle, bind the bond, one whispers. Let no shadow come between. You feel as though you're intruding on something sacred, and yet you can't look away. When the last braid falls loose, they place a soft linen veil over her head, not white but pale blue, the color of patience. It's worn not for modesty but for transition, marking the space between old self and new. The groom arrives then, his face flushed from ale and nervousness. The room bursts into polite giggles. Even centuries later, you can feel the awkwardness radiating off him like heat. His best friend, predictably drunk, claps him on the shoulder. "Courage," he says, "you'll need it." The gifts are formally presented. The bride hands him the garland and he offers her a belt, a simple strip of leather tooled with tiny stars. It's practical, yes, but also symbolic. Protection, unity, and perhaps a bit of possessiveness disguised as poetry. When he fastens it around her waist, everyone claps. "It fits," someone says approvingly. "Good omen." A girl brings in a bowl of water infused with mint and rosemary. The couple dips their hands together, washing away the dust of the day. It's a small, fragrant moment of calm, the kind that feels timeless. You can almost hear modern wedding photographers sighing in envy at the aesthetic perfection. When they finish, the priest, recovered from his hangover, blesses the tokens once more. He mutters something about purity, then sneezes loudly from the herb's scent. The crowd laughs. "Even the devil can't stand rosemary," he jokes, which earns him a playful scolding from the bride's aunt. Dinner follows, a quieter affair than the previous night's feast. Stew again, of course, but this time shared from a single bowl between the couple, symbolizing unity. He feeds her first. She returns the gesture. Everyone watches as if it's theater, which in a way it is. Marriage in medieval England is a public performance of private vows. Afterward, the guests retreat, leaving behind whispers and clinking cups. Only family remains now, tidying up, stoking the fire, ensuring the couple's chamber is ready. The bed, if you can call it that, is a sturdy wooden frame layered with straw, linen, and wool. Above it, sprigs of rowan and rosemary dangle from the beam, hung to ward off envy and evil. You can't help but grin. Medieval home decor. 1 part romance, 2 parts exorcism. In the quiet that follows, the mother gives her daughter one final gift, a small wooden box. Inside rests a scrap of parchment inscribed with a psalm. "For peace in the home," she says softly. The bride nods, clutching it like a secret. As night settles, you step outside again. The sky is a velvet blue scattered with stars, and the village has gone still. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, carrying with it the faint perfume of burnt honey and herbs. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then falls silent. You think of the tokens, each small object glowing in the candlelight, each carrying stories that will outlast their owners. A ring that will one day be buried with her. A belt passed down to a daughter, a garland dried and hung in the rafters until it crumbles to dust. The symbols endure even as the hands that touched them fade away. Maybe that's the quiet magic of it all. In a world where life can be short and uncertain, these tokens give love a shape, a permanence it can't always find in words. You take one last look at the window, where 2 shadows move gently behind linen curtains. The laughter that drifts out is soft, shy, and new. Whatever bargains and customs brought them here, tonight they're simply 2 people learning how to share the same breath. A breeze stirs the petals on the doorstep. They shimmer briefly in the moonlight, then settle again, tiny remnants of vows that, for now, still hold. Morning comes again, cool, misty, and edged with the low murmur of bells from the church across the field. You step out into the lane just as the dew is breaking into 1,000 bright mirrors across the grass. A few chickens scratch by the doorway, indifferent to history. Somewhere, the sound of a bucket clanging against a well echoes like a heartbeat. The bride and groom are already awake, standing together outside the cottage. Today, their union must be made official before God and community alike, not in the privacy of the hearth, but beneath open sky, at the threshold of the church. The ceremony is called the church door promise, a custom both practical and symbolic. You walk beside them as they make their way down the lane. The villagers follow in clusters, talking quietly, clutching baskets of bread, flowers, and coins. The road winds past the green and toward the gray stone church that crowns the village's rise like a sleeping giant. Its wooden door is streaked by centuries of weather, its hinges squealing faintly as the sexton pushes it open to let the morning light spill through. You pause on the threshold, and something about the space feels ancient, older even than the faith that claims it. The doorway is carved with twisting vines and faded beasts, half pagan, half Christian. For centuries, couples have stood exactly here, repeating words that blur the boundary between contract and confession. The priest greets them, this time sober, robe-pressed, voice firm. He begins the service not inside the church but precisely on the doorstep. That's the rule. Inside belongs to the sacraments of the baptized. Outside is where the world of promises and property lives. The doorway is both border and bridge, the place where earthly deals meet divine witness. The couple stands hand in hand, and the priest's voice rolls out in solemn rhythm. "Wilt thou take this woman," he intones, "to thy wedded wife as law and the church ordain?" The groom answers, his words steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I will." The bride's reply follows, clear, sure, almost defiant. "I will." For a moment everything stills. The birds, the whispers, even the wind. It's as if the world itself pauses to listen. Then the priest blesses the joining of their hands, literally ties them with a length of cord. This is the handfasting, the visible bond of their promise. The cord is made from two colors, red for passion, white for faith. He knots it 3 times, muttering Latin under his breath. It's a practical ritual, simple enough that even if no priest were around, a village elder could perform it, but also steeped in mystery. Historians still argue whether the custom originated as a Christian adaptation of older Norse or Celtic betrothals, where the binding symbolized not merely consent but fate. You notice the way the couple stares at the knot. It's not just string, it's the map of their future, tangled and unbreakable. Once the vows are done, the priest gestures toward the doorway. "Now you may enter as one." And so they step across together into the shadowed cool of the nave. The crowd follows, spilling in like a tide. The church smells of wax, damp stone, and history. In the dim light, colored glass paints fragments of saints and stories across the flagstones. The priest chants a short blessing, sprinkling them with water drawn from the font. "What God hath joined together," he declares, "let no man put asunder." The echo lingers against the walls. You think of all the couples who have heard those same words and how many of them, centuries later, would find that asunder part far trickier than promised. After the blessing, the couple approaches the altar to leave a small offering, a token coin, glinting faintly in the candlelight. It's less about money than gratitude. The church will record their marriage in its book, securing their union not just before heaven but before history. As the priest closes the register, he mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "And may they never forget to tithe." You almost laugh, catching the faint smirk he hides behind his sleeve. The service ends, but no one leaves immediately. The villagers linger, chatting softly, admiring the bride's new belt, peeking curiously at the cord still tied around their hands. You catch snippets of gossip about who's next to marry, who's been courting whom behind the mill. Church thresholds, it seems, are as much for rumor as for ritual. The bride's mother kneels briefly at a side altar, lighting a candle to the Virgin. "For her safety," she whispers. You can't help but notice she lights a second one less discreetly, "for patience." It's the most honest prayer of the morning. As the bells begin to ring again, the couple turns toward the door. But before they step out, the priest stops them, pointing upward. There, carved into the lintel, is a small face, a grotesque half-human creature with bulging eyes. "That's the guardian," he says. "Don't look it in the eye when you leave, else it'll keep your happiness for itself." You almost roll your eyes, but the couple obediently lowers their gaze. Superstition and faith walk hand in hand here, neither quite eclipsing the other. Once outside, the villagers erupt into cheers. Children throw handfuls of oats instead of petals this time, grain for wealth and good harvests. A small boy pelts the groom a little too enthusiastically, earning a cuff on the ear from his mother. Laughter ripples through the crowd. A fiddler starts to play again, this time slower, gentler. The newlyweds take their first steps as husband and wife down the lane, hands still bound by that red and white cord. The villagers follow, singing an old tune whose words have changed over the centuries but whose melody stays the same, a rising, falling rhythm like the turning of a wheel. You walk behind them, half listening, half lost in thought. In modern times, marriage certificates and diamond rings will replace cords and coins. Yet here, at this moment, everything feels strangely complete. The vows, the knot, the witness of sky and stone, it's all enough. At the end of the lane, they stop by a small bridge that crosses a trickling stream. The groom unties the cord carefully, then tosses it into the water. It floats for a moment before sinking, its colors vanishing into the current. "So goes all ill fortune," he says, quoting the old custom. She laughs and flicks a drop of water back at him. "Or good fortune if it swims," she teases. You grin. Already they're learning that every ritual invites contradiction. Nearby, a wandering friar leans on his staff, watching the scene with a knowing smile. "Once upon a time," he says to you, "marriages like this needed no church, no priest, only the promise of the mouth and the joining of hands. Some say those were simpler days, others say they were chaos." He shrugs. "But the Lord works in mysteries and local customs alike." He wanders off, humming a hymn that sounds suspiciously like a drinking song. As the couple continues down the lane, the villagers begin to disperse again, each returning to their day's work. A few linger by the bridge, dipping their fingers in the stream for luck. You follow their gaze as the sunlight catches the ripples where the cord disappeared. For an instant, the water seems to shimmer with color, red and white threads twisting like twin paths. You remember the doorway, the carved beasts, the echo of vows, the weight of history pressing on every stone. You wonder how many promises that church has heard, and how many were kept. Above you, the bells toll one final time, and the sound rolls across the valley like a blessing, or maybe a reminder, that love, faith, and formality will forever be tangled together, much like that vanished cord beneath the stream. You turn back toward the village, where the scent of baking bread already drifts on the wind, and where preparations are underway for the feast that will last until the stars burn low again. By the time the sun tilts westward, the village green has transformed. The quiet patch of grass where goats once grazed now thrums with color, laughter, and the smell of roasting meat. You step into the scene like someone walking through a dream, or maybe through a medieval carnival that somehow forgot to end. The feast is about to begin. Tables of rough-hewn oak and birch line the square, covered in linen cloths that have seen better days but are scrubbed clean for the occasion. The air shimmers with heat from a line of cooking pits. You can smell everything at once: spitted pork turning slowly over the fire, loaves baking in outdoor ovens, and honey-glazed apples hissing in pans. Somewhere, someone is already dipping ladles into a barrel of ale, humming an off-key love ballad that's at least 2 centuries old. You find a seat beside an old woman who smells faintly of lavender and smoked fish. She's peeling onions with a dagger that looks older than she is. "Been to more weddings than priests," she tells you proudly, "and more funerals, but we don't talk about those on feast day." She winks, offering you an onion slice as though it were a delicacy. You decline politely. At the center of the green stands the high table, literally higher, raised on a wooden platform so the couple and their families can be admired or envied by all. The bride wears a crown of rosemary and myrtle now, not the church cord but something lighter, fragrant. Her husband has changed into a linen tunic embroidered by his mother, who is currently fussing over a dish of pottage as if it were a royal banquet. When the priest finally blesses the food, half the village bows heads in prayer, the other half just pretends to while sneaking bites. You can't blame them. The smell of roasted goose could convert even the most hardened skeptic. The first toast goes up. To the bride and groom, may their bed be fruitful and their neighbors jealous. The crowd roars with laughter. It's the medieval equivalent of someone tapping a glass for a speech. As you eat, carefully avoiding the overly salty fish pie, You begin to notice how the whole event hums with coded meaning. Every dish, every game, even the seating arrangement is symbolic. The presence of salt on the table, for instance, marks social rank. The closer you sit to it, the higher you're standing. You naturally are below the salt, somewhere near the juggler and the blacksmith's apprentice who keeps stealing sips of cider when he thinks no one's watching. At one end of the green, children chase each other around a maypole, their ribbons fluttering like bright tails. The fiddler from earlier has joined a small band of pipe and drum players, their rhythm quickening as dancers spin into circles. You can't help but tap your foot along, though after a few minutes, you suspect that most participants have no idea whether they're performing a folk dance or just avoiding collisions. Still, there's joy in the chaos. Somewhere between the third toast and the first spilled jug, the old woman beside you leans close again. Back in my day, she says, they'd hide the couple's shoes after the feast, a sign that marriage meant giving up freedom. She chuckles, revealing a row of teeth like weathered tombstones. Now they just throw them at the carriage. Progress. Historians still argue whether those old customs were acts of affection or subtle warnings. In some villages, the newlyweds were paraded through the streets with ribbons and laughter. In others, they were mockingly serenaded in what was called the charivari, a noisy, teasing racket of pots, horns, and songs meant to bless the marriage. Whether it was blessing or mild bullying is debatable, but it proves one thing: the medieval English never let a wedding go quietly. The bride and groom rise for their dance. The fiddler slows his tune and the crowd forms a ring. You can feel the hush settle over them, anticipation mixed with ale. They clasp hands, stepping carefully at first, then more confidently. The groom spins her once, her skirt flaring like a turning flower, and the villagers cheer. You spot the priest at the edge of the crowd, trying to appear solemn while clearly tapping one foot beneath his robe. A sudden shriek of laughter cuts through the music. Near the ale barrels, two farm boys have decided to wrestle over what no one knows. The crowd roars its approval, cheering each tumble. The bride's mother sighs, muttering something about boys and barley. You wander closer to the fire pits. Someone's roasting chestnuts now, tossing them with herbs. A young tanner hands you one, still too hot to hold. "First time at a wedding?" he asks. You nod. "Don't worry," he says. By the third course, even the priest starts to look like a decent dance partner. You laugh, biting into the chestnut and nearly burning your tongue. Worth it. At the next table, two scholars, identifiable by their ink-stained fingers, are arguing. You catch fragments of their debate, whether the ritual of breaking bread together originates from Roman nuptial feasts or from early Christian communion. "It's both," one insists. No, says the other. "Bread in marriage is about economy, not theology, symbol of sustenance." They glare, then simultaneously reach for the same loaf. You suspect neither of them will find sustenance in the end. Above them, the sky deepens to violet. Torches are lit, casting everything in honey-colored glow. A child releases a paper lantern. It rises briefly before snagging in a tree, where it burns with quiet determination. The villagers cheer anyway. The high table clears a way for the wedding play, a short comic performance put on by the younger folk. You watch as they don mismatched costumes. A knight in a dented kettle helmet, a lady in a curtain for a gown. The story is some mix of romance and farce, an exaggerated version of the day's events, with the priest sneezing mid-blessing and the bride accidentally marrying a pig by mistake. Everyone howls with laughter, even the real couple, who look relieved to be characters in someone else's chaos for a change. Behind the laughter, though, there's an undercurrent of something tender. These jokes, these songs, these half-serious games, they're how a community seals itself together. The feast isn't just about two people, it's about everyone's participation in the promise. Later, as the moon rises, you wander toward the edge of the green. From here, you can see the entire scene as if from above. The fires, the circling dancers, the flare of torchlight on faces. It's messy, noisy, imperfect, and somehow entirely alive. A minstrel begins to sing a slow ballad now, his voice rough but beautiful. The lyrics tell of a knight who vows eternal love before realizing he's pledged it to a ghost. The crowd sighs and murmurs at the end, half moved, half amused. Classic mistake, someone mutters behind you. Nearby, the bride's younger sister tosses apple peels over her shoulder to see what letter they form, a charm to reveal the initial of her future husband. It lands in a squiggle that looks vaguely like an R, she squeals. Her friends insist it looks more like a worm. By midnight, the ale has mellowed even the sharpest tongues. The groom's father has fallen asleep against a barrel, snoring softly. The priest, now flushed and cheerful, is engaged in a philosophical debate with a goose. The bride, laughing, takes your arm as she passes. "Still alive?" she asks teasingly. "Barely," you reply. "I wasn't built for this century's stamina." She grins. "None of us are, that's why we dance, so the exhaustion feels like joy." The fire crackles, throwing sparks into the night sky. For a moment, everything blurs, the centuries, the laughter, the scent of wood smoke and wine. You realize that what you're seeing isn't just a feast, it's memory itself, preserved in rhythm and ritual. And as the fiddler strikes one final, lingering note, you close your eyes and let it echo, like the heartbeat of 1,000 weddings before this one, still pulsing softly beneath the English stars. Morning creeps in again, soft and golden, filtering through shutters and thatch. You wake to the faint smell of damp earth and something far less poetic, ale, still clinging to your clothes like a bad decision. The village is quiet now, hungover in spirit if not in body. A few chickens scold the sun for being too bright. Somewhere, someone is already sweeping confetti made of crushed herbs and bread crumbs from the church steps. You stretch and step outside, still blinking sleep from your eyes. The air carries a different energy today, not the anticipation of vows or the chaos of feasting, but something slower, steadier. This is the morning after, the dawn of what the villagers call the bedding morn. Traditionally, this is when the community makes sure the marriage has been, well, consummated. You probably won't survive that tradition either, but don't worry. It's more spectacle than scandal these days. Down the lane, you see the bride's family home bustling again. Women carry linens to the river for washing, whispering and giggling in that knowing way. "They'll hang the sheets, won't they?" one says, grinning. "If there's proof," another smirks. "And if there is," the first shrugs. "Then they'll hang something anyway. No one wants to waste good gossip." Historians still argue whether this proof on the sheets ritual was ever truly widespread or mostly folklore exaggerated by later writers. Some records hint it was symbolic, clean sheets displayed to show domestic readiness, not actual evidence. Others, less charitable, suggest that entire villages once gathered to witness the bedding. You decide not to think too hard about that version. The sound of laughter pulls you toward the inn, where the groom's friends are nursing mugs of weak cider and heroic hangovers. One of them waves you over. "Big day today," he says with mock solemnity. "The first morning of the rest of their complaints." His companion snorts into his cup. Inside the cottage, the bride and groom emerge at last, hair tousled, eyes bleary but smiling. They're greeted with cheers and teasing from the crowd outside. Someone hands them bread dipped in honey, someone else, a cup of spiced milk. "Sweetness for the start," the old woman from yesterday explains. "And milk to bind it," she winks. "If they're lucky, they'll remember each other's names before supper." The couple laughs, accepting the gifts. They look genuinely content, tired, yes, but lighter somehow, as if they've crossed another invisible threshold. You walk with them as they make their way toward the field behind the church, where more traditions await. The morning gifts are next, tokens exchanged between the newlyweds after their first night. In noble households, this might mean estates, jewelry, or even livestock. Here it's simpler. The groom presents her with a silver pin for her hair, and she gives him a pair of knitted gloves. "So your hands remember mine," she says shyly. It's a small moment, easily missed amid the laughter and chatter, yet somehow more intimate than all of yesterday's spectacle. Nearby, the priest appears again, yawning and rubbing his temples. A blessed union, he mutters automatically, though his expression suggests he's praying more for silence. The villagers gather again on the green, not for a feast this time, but a fair, a gentler affair of trade and blessing. Stalls are set up selling ribbons, trinkets, and food. Children chase geese. The bride's mother sits with a basket of herbs, offering charms for long love and short arguments. You ask what's in them. Mostly mint, she says, and the rest is hope. At one stall, an old man carves hearts into wooden spoons. He offers one to you. A wedding spoon, he says proudly. Every kitchen needs one. Keeps the quarrels mild and the broth thick. You buy it, half out of superstition, half because it's the best souvenir you'll ever find from the 14th century. By midday, the green fills again with music, though softer this time, lutes, not fiddles. A minstrel sings of two lovers separated by war who find each other again when one returns disguised as a beggar. The tune drifts lazily over the fields, catching in the breeze. The villagers hum along as if the story belongs to all of them. A group of young men perform a mock tournament for entertainment. Wooden swords clash, and one particularly enthusiastic competitor pretends to faint dramatically after a light tap. The crowd cheers anyway. Every knight must die gloriously, someone calls, or not at all. You notice the bride and groom sitting apart from the crowd for a moment, talking quietly. Her head rests on his shoulder. Their laughter is softer now, not the loud, uncertain kind from yesterday, but something steadier, built from exhaustion and comfort. You don't need to hear the words to understand them. The priest, perhaps feeling sentimental or simply running low on patience, steps forward and begins a brief sermon, shorter than yesterday's but far more human. He speaks of vows not as contracts but as gardens that must be tended. You smile. That metaphor will follow this story long after he's gone. After the sermon, the villagers disperse to their chores. Life resumes its ordinary rhythm, yet everything feels slightly altered, as if the world itself shifted overnight. The air hums with quiet satisfaction. The fields seem greener, the church bells gentler. Even the geese look smug. You wander down to the river where the women are still washing linens. One of them spots you and waves. "Don't worry," she calls. "We only hang the sheets if they're scandalous." She laughs so hard she nearly drops the washing. The water is cool, glittering in the afternoon light. You sit by the bank watching the ripples spread. This place, this village, this wedding, feels timeless, suspended between the sacred and the ordinary. Nearby, the old friar you met before appears again, his sandals muddy, his grin the same. "Well," he says, sitting beside you, "another marriage sealed, another generation begun." "Do they always go this smoothly?" you ask. He chuckles. "Smooth is for parchment, not people. Give it a month and they'll argue about firewood or in-laws. But that's the miracle, isn't it? They argue and yet they stay." You watch the water drift by, carrying leaves and sunlight downstream. "Is that faith?" you ask. "Sometimes," he says. "Sometimes it's just good ale and shared chores." A pause stretches between you. Then he adds, "Historians will argue about what makes a marriage endure, love, duty, fear, or stubbornness. But those of us who live in it, we know it's all of them woven tight." He stands brushing dust from his robe. "Now then, there's a rumor of leftover pie near the church. Holiness can wait for pastry." And with that, he shuffles off. You stay by the river a little longer, listening to the murmur of water against stone, the distant laughter from the green, and the rhythmic beat of the smith's hammer far away. The sounds layer together, domestic, steady, eternal. It occurs to you that the bedding morn isn't just the end of a wedding. It's the quiet establishment of a shared life. The festival fades, but the rhythm remains. Work, laughter, prayer, and occasionally pie. As the day softens toward evening, you head back toward the village, spoon tucked safely in your belt. The path glows amber in the light, and for the first time, you understand why they call it the Garden of Vows. Every field, every doorway, every stream seems planted with promises, tended, harvested, and renewed, year after year. Some promises, you think, grow best in the morning after. The sun dips low, sliding toward the western trees, and the village exhales that slow, satisfied sigh that always follows a celebration. Smoke from the last cooking fires curls lazily into the sky, and the air smells of damp grass, ale dregs, and wood ash. You wander back toward the green, where the remnants of yesterday's feast lie like footprints of joy, crumbs, ribbons, a single forgotten shoe near the maypole. Someone hung it on a post, just in case its owner remembers tomorrow. You might think the festivities would end here, but no. In medieval England, weddings were never just one-day affairs. They unfolded like stories, one act spilling into the next, each with its own rhythm and symbolism. Tonight brings the blessing procession, a twilight ritual that ties the couple's union not just to faith or family, but to the very land itself. You find the villagers gathering again, torches in hand. The bride and groom lead the way, dressed simply now. No crowns or finery, only plain wool and bare heads. Around them, people sing a hymn that's half prayer, half folk tune, its melody haunting in the dimming light. The lyrics tell of love as a journey through 4 seasons. Sowing in spring, thriving in summer, enduring autumn's change, and resting in winter's sleep. The path winds through the fields, past hedgerows, and into open meadow. Fireflies spark like tiny lanterns among the grasses. You walk beside a farmer who hums the tune softly. "We bless the land so it blesses them," he explains. "If the fields are kind, so will their marriage be." It's an old belief that the earth itself responds to human vows. Some historians argue it's a leftover from pagan fertility rites, quietly baptized into Christian custom. Others insist it's simply poetic metaphor that took on ritual form. Either way, it's beautiful, the way people once saw no divide between the sacred and the soil beneath their feet. As you walk, villagers scatter handfuls of seed, barley, oats, flax across the path. The bride stoops to gather one seed from each pile, tucking them into a pouch on her belt. "For planting the first spring," someone calls, so her hands remember the promise. The torches flicker, their light rippling across the fields. You can hear the low hum of crickets, the occasional bleat of a sheep startled awake. The landscape feels alive, leaning in to listen. Halfway to the meadow's edge, the procession halts by an ancient oak. Its trunk is thick and hollow, its bark etched with carvings so old their meanings are lost. Children whisper that fairies live inside. Adults pretend not to believe it. The priest, naturally, insists the tree is simply God's oldest parishioner. The bride and groom approach the oak, guided by the friar, the same wandering one you've met twice now. His grin is unmistakable even by torchlight. "Now," he says, "give back what the earth gave you." From her pouch, the bride takes a pinch of each seed and scatters it at the oak's roots. The groom pours a small jug of ale beside it, an offering, though whether to the soil or to the spirits of ale-making ancestors is anyone's guess. The friar raises his staff. "Bless this union and bless the harvests to come," he says softly. "Let neither hunger nor cold take what love has planted." The crowd murmurs amen, though a few hedge their bets with a quick toss of coins into the roots, a little extra insurance against divine forgetfulness. Then comes the curious part. Each villager takes a turn walking past the couple, tapping them lightly on the shoulders with a sprig of green herbs, rosemary for remembrance, sage for wisdom, and rue for protection. You're handed a sprig, too. You hesitate, then gently tap the bride's shoulder. She smiles sleepily, the scent of herbs mingling with the warm night air. "Thank you," she says quietly, "for walking this far with us." You nod, though you're not entirely sure whether she means the path, the night, or something deeper, the shared act of remembering. When the last villager passes, the friar motions for silence. The torches are lowered, and for a moment only the moon lights the meadow. "The vows are not only words," he says. "They are patterns in the world. When 2 lives intertwine, so does everything around them, their families, their fortunes, their fields. The earth keeps the echo long after we are gone. You feel the truth of it in the stillness that follows. Even the night birds seem to pause. And then, like all good medieval ceremonies, someone sneezes. Loudly. The crowd bursts into laughter, the spell gently broken. The friar sighs but grins. Bless you too, then. As the procession winds back toward the village, the music shifts again. The fiddler, miraculously recovered, strikes up a softer tune, and couples begin to dance as they walk. It's less formal now, more like swaying than dancing. Hands clasp, feet shuffle, and voices rise in half-remembered harmony. You catch fragments of conversation, talk of next week's harvest, of mending roofs before the frost, of who might marry next. The mundane folds perfectly into the sacred. There's no border between the two anymore. When you reach the edge of the green, the bride pauses and looks back toward the fields. Her husband joins her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. It's strange, she murmurs. It all feels so old, and yet it's new for us. He nods. That's how old things stay alive, by being lived again. You glance at the oak in the distance, its branches black against the stars. You think about all the couples who must have stood beneath it before. Different faces, same vows, same quiet hope that their love might endure as long as the roots of that tree. The priest calls for a final blessing, brief and weary. May peace dwell where love begins, he says, raising his hand. The villagers bow their heads. Then, just like that, the ceremony dissolves into laughter again. Someone trips over a torch handle, a dog steals a loaf of bread, and a baby begins wailing like a broken horn. You can't help but smile. The sacred and the silly, hand in hand, that's the true heart of medieval life. Later, when the crowd disperses, you find yourself sitting by the last dying fire on the green. The moon hangs low, painting silver across the grass. The air is cool, almost damp, and the only sound is the gentle crackle of embers. Across the way, the newlyweds stand together outside their cottage. A faint candle glows in the window. He's speaking softly, and she's laughing, that quiet, real kind of laughter that doesn't need witnesses. They disappear inside, and the door closes. You lean back on your elbows, gazing up at the stars. Somewhere far off, a fox barks once sharp, echoing, alive. You wonder what future lies ahead for them. Years of joy, perhaps, or hardship, or both. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that tonight, the world paused long enough to bless their beginning. And beneath the ancient oak, the seeds wait patiently for spring. Morning comes softly to the village, the kind of pale dawn that smells of dew and ashes. Smoke drifts from a few chimneys, thin and hesitant. Somewhere, a cockerel crows with a cracked, sleepy voice. You rise from your spot near the green, brushing grass from your cloak. The world feels newly made, as if the wedding night itself has reset time. You walk through the quiet lanes. The maypole stands crooked now, its ribbons tangled and faded. A child's garland of daisies has fallen into the mud. The last echoes of music are gone, replaced by the rustle of geese and the creak of cartwheels starting their daily rounds. Life resumes as it always does. In the churchyard, the friar kneels beside the old oak, murmuring morning prayers. His hood is down, revealing hair like thin silver wire. He looks up when you approach. "Ah," he says, smiling faintly. "Still here. Most travelers move on by sunrise." "I thought I'd see what becomes of the day after," you say. He chuckles. "The day after is the truest part. The feast and dance, that's easy joy. But today, when they wake to ordinary light and empty cups, that's when the vows begin to mean something." You watch him sprinkle a little water at the oak's base. A blessing. Or a reminder, he says. Depends who you ask. He straightens slowly, joints creaking. "You've seen much these past nights, songs, fire, laughter, but remember this. For all the celebration, marriage was never only about two souls. It was a knot binding families, fields, and futures. Love, yes, but also duty. A man and woman's happiness was the village's harvest." You nod. Seems a lot to place on two people. He smiles, weary and wise. Aye, but perhaps that's why the feasts were so long, so they'd start their burdens with laughter. The friar shoulders his satchel and begins to walk toward the chapel. Before he goes, he glances back. If you pass through again in spring, look for the barley by the oak. If it grows straight, their love still stands. You wander to the edge of the meadow. The air carries that faint metallic scent of wet soil. You kneel and touch the ground where the seeds were cast. Tiny impressions remain, signs of hands, footsteps, the ghost of a dance. Soon rain or plow will erase them. It occurs to you that most history is like this. Brief traces, soon gone, leaving only what memory or storytelling can preserve. A dog trots past, tongue lolling. The miller waves from his door and a group of women begin scrubbing the feast platters in the brook. You hear snippets of their chatter, half gossip, half gratitude. They looked happy, says one. He's kind, says another. She's clever, that'll do. You smile. In a world without poets or philosophers for most people, such simple sentences are their own kind of wisdom. By noon, you've followed the dirt path leading beyond the fields. The village shrinks behind you, its sounds dimming into birdsong. Ahead, the road bends toward the forest, sunlight winking between branches. You pause once more, glancing back. Smoke rises lazily from the cottages. Somewhere a baby cries. Somewhere else, laughter bursts like sunlight. The oak stands watch in the distance, timeless and still. For a moment, you think of all the lives that have unfolded here. Births, vows, deaths, each one part of the same woven tapestry. The wedding was not an isolated story. It was one golden thread among thousands, gleaming briefly before vanishing into the fabric of centuries. You turn, step into the forest's green shadow, and let the past fold quietly behind you. If you listen closely, though, you can still hear it. The faint echo of a fiddle, the rustle of ribbons in the wind, the murmur of blessings drifting through the grass. And beneath the oak in the soft dark earth, the seeds begin their slow and silent work. You wake before dawn, the fire from the night before now a nest of cold embers. Outside, the world hums with quiet mischief. Something in the air is charged, playful, conspiratorial. You stretch, slip on your cloak, and follow the whispers that always seem to lead you to the village's next bit of chaos. The night of tricks, they call it, the unspoken continuation of every wedding feast worth remembering. You might think the marriage ended with vows and dancing, but no, not here. Here, the villagers believe that laughter seals the luck of the new couple and that pranks drive away envious spirits. And so, as dawn tiptoes over the thatched roofs, the games begin. You spot them first near the barn, a gaggle of young men tiptoeing with the seriousness of spies, holding a stolen chicken and a bucket of soot. They freeze when they see you. You didn't see us, one hisses. We're on a holy mission. Oh, you ask, to the holy chicken, I suppose. They snicker, vanishing behind the haystacks. Moments later, a muffled squawk and an explosion of feathers confirm that their plan is well underway. You follow the laughter toward the bride's cottage, where a dozen others are already scheming. The custom, as you quickly learn, is that no newly married couple should spend their first morning in peace. Doors are unbolted, shutters lifted, bedsheets swapped, and sometimes the poor groom's boots end up hanging from the church spire. The goal isn't cruelty, just a reminder that marriage belongs as much to the community as to the two dreamers who think it's theirs alone. You peek through a window as they carry out one of the oldest tricks, filling the couple's doorway with brambles and buckets of water. The bride's mother catches them, shaking her broom. "May Saint Swithin trip the lot of you," she shouts, but her grin betrays affection. Historians still argue whether these pranks began as pagan fertility rites or mere peasant mischief. One theory claims the villagers' noise was meant to confuse jealous spirits who might harm the couple. Another insists it was just an excuse for drunken tomfoolery disguised as ritual. Either way, you have to admit, it's effective entertainment. As the sun rises, the entire green becomes a stage. Someone parades through wearing the groom's hat, pretending to faint from love. Children scatter petals made of torn parchment. Even the village priest, trying his best to maintain dignity, is caught in the crossfire of flower and laughter. The strangest custom you witness is the bedding song. A group gathers outside the cottage, singing a teasing ballad while tossing small gifts, coins, herbs, sometimes even a dead mouse for luck apparently. The lyrics change every time, but the meaning is always the same. Welcome to married life. May your bed be warm and your patience endless. You try to imagine the couple inside, half amused, half horrified, as the village serenades them with bawdy verses. The friar, passing by, shakes his head. The church frowns on this sort of thing, he mutters. But between us, I think even God enjoys a good laugh. One man stumbles up beside you, eyes shining from too much ale. Tradition, he declares proudly. We prank M now so they'll never fear surprise again. He winks, then adds, besides, it keeps us from crying that another good lad been captured. You chuckle, captured. Aye, he says, marriage is war and silk. You file that line away, definitely worth repeating. Later, when the chaos fades to tired giggles, you find yourself sitting by the stream again. The air smells of trampled grass and roast goose. The bride's veil, now damp and tangled, drifts downstream like a ghost of last night's glory. You catch it before it disappears, setting it gently on a rock to dry. Nearby, two old women gossip while washing dishes in the cold water. They say she brought a charm from her aunt, one says. A lock of hair tied with red thread keeps a husband faithful. The other snorts. Ha, my husband had 2 locks of hair, his and the barmaid. You nearly choke on your laugh. Medieval humor, as it turns out, hasn't aged a day. Still, the conversation reminds you how deeply superstition shaped even the lightest moments. Everything had meaning, a ribbon's color, a gift's weight, even the time of morning when the couple first left their house. A rooster crowing early was a sign of lasting love. A candle blowing out too soon meant trouble ahead. And if someone sneezed before breakfast, better prepare for a quarrel before sundown. You wander toward the field's edge where a few men are already cleaning the remnants of last night's feast. One lifts a goblet and sighs. It's over too fast, he says. You look at him, the wedding. The youth of it, he replies. They're laughing now, but next week they'll be arguing over turnips and tithes. Still, he squints toward the village where the couple's cottage smokes gently in the distance. Maybe laughter like that stays in the walls. That thought lingers with you. Maybe all these pranks, jokes, and songs are less about teasing and more about memory. Maybe they're the villagers' way of ensuring the couple's beginning isn't swallowed by ordinary life too quickly. By dusk, the night of tricks has mellowed into weary peace. You see the bride and groom at last stepping out into the twilight. Their faces are flushed, their smiles small but real. They look around at the mess, the flour, the ribbons, the buckets, and laugh together. That laughter rings across the green like a blessing. Somewhere nearby, a musician starts playing a slow tune on a wooden flute. Not for dancing, not for revelry. Just a soft melody that seems to tie the day's madness together with a gentle bow. You lean against the old oak, closing your eyes. The air hums with distant echoes, footsteps, songs, whispered jokes fading into the night. The kind of silence that follows laughter, content, drowsy, eternal. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear the village exhale. Another marriage sealed, another year turning toward harvest, another story tucked into the great quilt of time. And as the moon climbs above the thatched roofs, pale and steady, you realize something simple. Even in the silliest of customs, there is devotion. Even in the pranks, there is care. For what is love, if not the courage to be foolish together under the same sky? You smile, tucking your cloak closer, and let the moonlight carry you onward toward the next whisper of history. The next morning unfolds like parchment unrolling after a storm. The laughter, the ribbons, the clatter of tankards, all of it has drifted into memory. You walk through the same lanes that just days ago pulsed with color and noise, and now only the echo remains. A chicken pecks at a forgotten crust. The maypole leans like a tired sentinel. It's the morning after happiness, and you can feel the weight of quieter stories pressing in. The friar once told you that for every celebrated wedding, there were 10 that dissolved into rumor, distance, or despair. You hadn't believed him then. But now, as you pass the weaver's cottage and hear 2 women whispering about a runaway bride, the truth of it settles in your chest. The woman in question, Marjorie, isn't the blushing girl from last night's celebration. She's older, perhaps 30, her second chance at marriage gone suddenly cold. She left before dawn, one woman mutters. Didn't even take her cloak. The other crosses herself. Better a cold road than a cold heart. You walk on, thoughtful. For every marriage celebrated with feast and song, there are those that quietly collapse beneath duty, poverty, or fear. In medieval England, love might start with promise, but vows were legal as much as spiritual, a cage gilded with expectation. At the edge of the village, you find a small wooden bench outside the church. A young man sits there, head bowed, fingers twisting the edge of a ring. You recognize him, the groom from the spring's earlier wedding. "She's gone," he says when he notices you, his voice small. "Father says she'll come back, but the priest says the vows were broken. So which is it? Am I married or not?" You hesitate. Historians still argue whether marriage was a contract of hearts or hands, you murmur. The church saw it one way, the village another. He gives a short, dry laugh. A fine thing to argue when your bed's empty. You leave him to his thoughts and wander toward the field where the oak tree stands. Beneath its shadow, you find a group of older women laying flowers, widows, you realize. They speak softly, almost to themselves. One hums a tune that sounds like a lullaby slowed by years. Another ties a faded ribbon around the base of the tree. "Do you always gather here?" you ask. "It's where the vows echo loudest," one replies without looking up. "We bring what's left of ours." You sit nearby, listening to their murmurs weave with the wind. Each story that slips from their lips carries a different tone, some resigned, some warm, some still sharp with longing. One woman tells of her husband who died in France, leaving her the forge and 3 sons. Another speaks of being married at 12, widowed by 15, and courted again before she turned 20. In those voices, you begin to understand something that feasts rarely show. Marriage, for many, was not the start of a fairy tale but a negotiation with survival. It bound people to land, to family, to God, and sometimes it bound them too tightly. You wander next to the manor at the village's edge, where the steward oversees a different kind of union. In the courtyard, 2 servants are being joined by verbal contract. No feast, no flowers, just the steward's quill scratching against parchment. The bride fidgets with her apron, the groom stares at the ground. "By the word of my lord," says the steward, "you are man and wife." A coin exchanges hands, a chicken clucks, that's it. It's efficient, almost brutal in its simplicity. You ask one of the onlookers, "No church blessing?" "Too poor," she says, shrugging. "The priest charges for the mass. They'll make their own vows under the stars tonight. God can listen from the hedge." There's something beautiful in that, you think. Stripped of ceremony, what remains is pure intention, the same words spoken for centuries, whispered into the night like a promise and a dare. As evening draws in, you stop at the tavern for a mug of warm ale. The innkeeper, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, recognizes your curiosity at once. "Looking for stories, are you?" she says. "You'll find plenty under this roof." She gestures toward a quiet corner where 2 men are playing dice. "That one," she says, nodding at the taller of the 2, "married the brewer's daughter while still betrothed to the miller's niece. Claimed the priest's Latin confused him. Dominus or domina, who can tell?" You nearly spit your drink laughing. "What happened to him?" "Excommunication first," she says, and then she taps the side of her nose, forgiveness, after a generous donation of ale to the friary. God loves charity after all. Outside, thunder grumbles in the distance. The innkeeper lights another candle. Shadows crawl up the timbered walls and her voice drops softer. You know, some say that's why vows were made at the church door. God as witness, but not yet inside his house, just in case one needed to run. You tilt your head, run. She says, eyes glinting. There's always been a crack in the door of holy law. Even saints left through it once or twice. As the rain begins, you make your way to the old bridge crossing the stream. The air smells of wet stone and lavender. You pause, hearing a quiet sob from beneath the arch. A young girl sits there, clutching a ribbon, the same color as the bride from a few nights ago. It's cursed, she whispers. He gave it to me and then he wed another. You crouch beside her. Maybe it's not cursed, maybe it just belongs to the wrong story. She stares at the ribbon, then nods slowly. I'll toss it then. And she does, into the dark, swirling water where it vanishes like all forgotten vows. As you stand, you notice how the rain softens everything. The path, the edges of the cottages, even the ache of the broken-hearted. The past and present blur until all the stories of joy, deceit, loyalty, loss seem to merge into one long, rippling melody. By the time you return to the village square, torches flicker against the dark, casting halos on the puddled ground. A group of children skip in circles, chanting an old rhyme. 2 by 2 and none to part. Hand to hand and heart to heart. If vows do fade and seasons fall, love remembers after all. You realize then that not every vow was meant to last forever in law or flesh. Some survive in memory, song, or even the gentle mischief of a wedding prank retold by the hearth. That, too, is a kind of permanence, fragile but luminous. When the last torch dies, you remain beneath the oak a moment longer, letting the rain cool your face. Somewhere beyond the fields, the world is already moving on to its next promise, its next pair of trembling hands reaching for eternity. You smile softly. The feast has ended, but the echoes of every I do still hum in the soil, and maybe that's enough. You leave the muddy lanes of the village behind and follow the rutted road east, where the air thickens with the scent of smoke and tanned leather. The sound of hammers replaces birdsong. The rhythm of work hums like a heartbeat. Ahead lies the market town, a cluster of timbered buildings with banners fluttering over the square. And somewhere amid the bustle, a different kind of marriage is taking place, one born not of barley and blessings, but of contracts and coin. You step beneath a carved stone arch and into the guild quarter, where artisans and merchants hold power as firmly as any noble. Here, love dresses itself in parchment and wax seals. The goldsmith's hall gleams with pride. The weaver's guild smells faintly of dye and ambition. Every window bursts with color. Silks imported from Italy, glass beads from France, pepper that could pay for a dowry twice over. You pause at a doorway where a small ceremony unfolds. The groom, a young cooper, wears his best doublet, stained in places by oak dust. The bride, daughter of a vintner, hides a smile behind her veil. Between them stands the guild master, reading aloud from a charter that sounds less like a blessing and more like a trade agreement. By mutual consent and fair promise, he declares, the families of Turner and Barlow do unite their crafts, their purses, and their honor. A scribe notes every word. When the quill stills, the couple exchange rings, not gold but copper, engraved with tiny initials. You catch the groom's grin as he slips the band onto her hand. Love, it seems, still manages to peek through the bureaucracy. Historians still argue whether guild marriages were truly affectionate or merely pragmatic. Some claim that partnerships in trade naturally led to affection. Others believe sentiment had little room amid profit and production. But as you watch the young couple's shy glances, you sense something genuine beneath the ceremony's polish, a spark that refuses to bow to ledgers. You wander deeper into the town, past stalls of spices and wool. 2 apprentices laugh as they hang garlands over a baker's door. Another wedding, you ask. 3rd this month, one says proudly. Good for business, everyone orders sweet rolls. Inside, the baker's wife is icing small heart-shaped pastries. It's for Anne and Robert, she explains. He's a scrivener. She can read and write better than any man I know. They've been sending notes to each other for a year, all written in code. Code, you repeat. Oh yes, she says, chuckling. They hide messages in recipes. The priest says it's sinful, I say it's clever. You smile. In a world where ink was precious and privacy rarer still, coded valentines were acts of quiet rebellion. Love found its own language, between flower and Latin, sealed with a wink. By afternoon, you reach the guild hall where banners hang heavy from the rafters. A wedding feast is underway inside. Merchants, apprentices, even the mayor himself gathered around long tables. You slip in through the side door, unnoticed. The air is thick with roasted goose, nutmeg, and gossip. At the high table, the bride and groom toast each other with silver cups. Around them, the conversation hums with talk of trade routes and tariffs. A minstrel plays softly in the corner, but few listen. Instead, deals are struck between bites of pudding. You realize this is a different kind of romance, the marriage of industry and opportunity. Still, small moments of tenderness bloom amid the formality. The groom reaches for the bride's hand beneath the table. She leans close to whisper something that makes him laugh, an honest laugh, the kind that can't be rehearsed. It's a reminder that love adapts, even when wrapped in silk and sealed in wax. As you sip watered wine from a borrowed goblet, an older merchant beside you nudges your elbow. Married for affection, did they? He asks with a knowing smirk. Seems so, you say. Ha, give it a year. Affection's fine until someone miscounts the ledgers. He chuckles into his beard. Still, better affection than debt. I'd marry a miser if she had a good head for figures. You grin, romantic. He winks. In my trade, arithmetic is romance. Outside, dusk settles over the rooftops. You wander to the scribe's alley where lamplight glows behind latticed windows. Inside one workshop, a young man copies verses of Chaucer onto parchment. You watch as his pen dances, for love is blindle day and may not see. He looks up and catches your eye. You read. A little, you answer. He grins. Then you know, love's the one thing our ink can't quite pin down. You nod, and for a moment, you both simply listen to the scratch of quills and the murmuring of clerks reciting lines aloud. It's oddly soothing, the sound of words being built like bridges between hearts centuries apart. Later, in a dim courtyard, you overhear two apprentices whispering near a water trough. He's promised her, says one, but her father forbids it, says a cooper's boy isn't fit for a vintner's girl. What will they do? The other asks. She'll meet him at the wharf tonight. They're sailing for Calais. You blink. Elopement, even here in the middle of parchment and protocol. Some stories never change. You follow them at a distance through the narrow alleys until the docks open before you. Lanterns sway over the black water. The couple stands by a merchant barge, hands clasped tight. They'll call it sin, she whispers. They'll call it folly. Then let's be foolish, he replies, and they step aboard. The barge drifts off into the mist, leaving only ripples and a single white ribbon caught on a mooring post. You reach out, free it gently, and watch it flutter away on the night wind. Perhaps the friar was right. Love is both sacred and practical, fragile and fierce. Whether it's forged in pewter cups or parchment ink, it finds its way. As you head back toward the sleeping town, the bells toll midnight. Somewhere, a window opens and a woman's voice drifts out, humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like the bridal procession from the village days ago. The melody loops, soft and endless. And you realize that whether sung by peasants or merchants, love's refrain is always the same: hopeful, foolish, necessary. The moonlight glints on the cobbles as you turn down a quiet street. Ahead, another wedding will rise. Another promise will be written and rewritten in the ledgers of time. For now, though, the town rests and you, half witness, half wanderer, rest with it. The road climbs away from the town and curls toward the high country, stone walls, cold wind, and estates that gleam faintly in the morning light. You've walked from the scent of tanneries to the perfume of rose gardens. And now, the air tastes of politics. Ahead stands Greystone Hall, a fortress disguised as a manor, its towers rising above the mist. Here, marriage means strategy. You can almost hear the echoes of quills scratching over treaties, fathers whispering about alliances, dowries measured in acres and heirs rather than affection. This is the noble world, where vows are inked in Latin and broken in French. You approach through the side gate just as a procession begins to gather in the courtyard. Horses paw at the cobbles, banners ripple in the sharp wind. The bride, Lady Cecily of Wexcombe, stands at the center, cloaked in crimson velvet. Her eyes are steady, her hands gloved, her expression unreadable. Across from her waits Sir Edmund, tall, proud, a soldier's tan fatting beneath the finery. They have met, you learn, only twice before today. Their marriage has been arranged to cement peace between rival families whose fields have burned and bled for a decade. You can almost taste the irony, love as the currency of reconciliation. The ceremony takes place in the great hall beneath the watchful gaze of portraits and ancestors. Candles flicker in iron sconces. The bishop drones the words in a tone that could sanctify or condemn equally. As the rings are exchanged, you notice Cecily's small movement, her left thumb tracing the edge of her glove as though memorizing freedom's last breath. When she glances at Edmund, you think you see both fear and calculation. She's no helpless maiden. She's playing the role expected of her, but her eyes already plan the years ahead like a chessboard. Historians still argue whether noblewomen of this era were victims of patriarchy or masters of subtle power. Some say they ruled their estates with iron grace. Others claim they were pawns passed from father to husband. Watching Cecily, you suspect the truth lies between, an unspoken rebellion beneath layers of silk. After the ceremony, a feast spreads across the long table, roasted venison, spiced pears, and trenchers carved with delicate flowers. But the atmosphere is taut. Every toast is a veiled speech, every smile a treaty under review. You hear one baron mutter to another, "May this union keep the peace at least until next harvest." You sip watered wine and drift toward the musicians. The minstrel tunes his lute, shaking his head. "I've played 50 weddings," he murmurs. "Half the brides looked happier at funerals." You raise a brow, "And the grooms?" He grins, too drunk to tell the difference. When the first dance begins, Cecily glides through the hall like mist, elegant, composed. Yet something flickers beneath the grace, a quiet resistance. You notice her whispering to one of her ladies-in-waiting, who slips away and returns with a folded note. A secret correspondence, perhaps, or maybe just a reminder that even here, love finds ways to survive through clever intermediaries. Later, as the hall empties and the guests disperse to their chambers, you wander into the garden. The moon hangs low, painting the marble statues in silver. You find Cecily standing alone by the fountain, her reflection fractured by ripples. "You're far from the village feasts," you say softly. She doesn't startle. "And you," she replies, "are far from where laughter still means joy." You hesitate. "Will you be happy here?" She laughs soft, bitter. "Happiness is not a coin we trade in, traveler. Peace will do." Then, after a pause, she adds, "My mother said that love is a weed. It grows where it shouldn't and never where it's planted." She touches the fountain's edge, her ring glinting cold. Perhaps she was right. A servant appears to escort her inside. You watch as she disappears through the arched doorway, swallowed by candlelight and expectation. The next day you walk along the outer walls where the guards exchange gossip between yawns. One mentions a rumor. Sir Edmund once had another love, a lady of lesser birth. He wrote her letters for years, the guard says, and burned them all the night before this wedding, or so they say. Another guard snorts. "And what good did that do? Fire remembers. You file that line away. Fire remembers. It's the truest phrase you've heard all day. Weeks pass in your wandering of the estate. You watch how power hums beneath every domestic scene. The steward accounting the harvests, the chaplain preaching obedience, the women weaving tapestries that depict battles they were never allowed to fight. And yet, amid the rigid order, there are flickers of rebellion. You see a servant girl sneak a rose into the chapel pew. You overhear laughter from the stables late at night. The world of nobles may polish its surfaces, but desire slips through the cracks like candle smoke. One afternoon you find Cecily in the orchard sketching something in charcoal. You approach quietly. On the parchment she's drawn not the manor or the garden, but a small village wedding, the kind you remember from your earlier nights. Rough cottages, simple garlands, laughter in motion. She notices your gaze. "I've never been to one," she says softly, "but I dream them." "Why?" you ask. "Because they look real." For a moment, the mask of nobility falls, and you glimpse the woman beneath, the one who might have danced barefoot under moonlight if not for birth and duty. Then she folds the sketch away. Dreams are dangerous currency here. By the time winter descends, Greystone Hall is locked in frost and rumor. They say Sir Edmund rides often, visiting neighbors. They say Lady Cecily spends her nights in prayer. They say much, as people always do when silence becomes unbearable. You stand once more at the gatehouse, looking back at the distant hall. Snow dusts the battlements, softening even stone. Perhaps love never belonged to this place of marble and strategy. Or perhaps it's just sleeping, waiting for spring to thaw its courage. As you turn to leave, the wind carries the faintest sound from the manor's tower, a lute playing a tune that doesn't belong to any courtly ballad, a folk melody, familiar. You smile, walking on. Maybe somewhere inside, Lady Cecily hums it too. You follow the trail of sound into twilight, soft bells ringing from the chapel tower, echoing over thatched roofs and mossy walls. The air grows thick with incense and secrets, and you realize you've wandered into the season of whispers, the one when folk turn to charms and moonlight to solve what prayers could not. Love in medieval England isn't just a feeling, it's an occupation. Everyone seems to dabble in it, from the village midwife stirring herbs to the monk copying psalms but sneaking a glance at a pilgrim's smile. Tonight, you walk among them, carrying the faint perfume of lavender and superstition. At the edge of a forest clearing, you stumble upon a small cottage. Candles flicker through the cracks, and inside sits an old woman with hands as gnarled as oak roots. Around her neck hangs a pouch filled with rowan berries and teeth from, hopefully, a harmless animal. She gestures for you to enter. "You seek love or luck," she croaks. You grin, "A story mostly." She chuckles, "Then you're cursed already." Her table overflows with ingredients, nettles, beeswax, rosewater, and, oddly, a piece of parchment covered in Latin. "For the heart that won't stay faithful," she says, waving it, "you write his name backward 3 times and drop it in wine. Works half the time." Historians still argue whether such cunning women were respected healers or feared witches. In truth, they were often both, half medicine, half mystery, entirely necessary. When priests failed to mend a broken marriage, people came here instead. You sit while she grinds petals into paste. "Once," she says, "a bride came to me the night before her wedding. She never met the man, wanted him to fall in love fast." "What did you do?" you ask. She smirks, "Told her to look him in the eye and say nothing for 3 breaths. No potion beats silence." You laugh softly and the fire cracks with approval. She leans closer. "They'll tell you the church bans charms," she whispers, "but what is a wedding if not a spell? Words, rings, smoke, same thing." And she's right. You remember the priest at the last noble wedding, murmuring Latin incantations while the couple exchanged rings. Ritual, repetition, symbol, magic under a different name. Outside, the bells toll again. The old woman nods toward the window. "They're banning more feasts," she mutters. "Too much dancing, too much laughter. The bishops say joy leads to sin. I say joy is the prayer." You leave her cottage with a charm made of thread and rosemary. She presses it into your hand. "Not for you," she says, "for the story." Back on the road, the night deepens. You pass through a hamlet where lovers meet in the shadows of barns. One couple holds hands through a fence, whispering promises they can't yet fulfill. Another trades rings woven from grass. They don't need priests or witnesses, just courage. A passing traveler tells you of hand fasting, a ritual still done in secret. A man and woman clasp hands, declare themselves wed before witnesses, and call it binding for a year and a day. Some say it's legal, others say it's sin. The church calls it irregular, but the people call it love. You pause under an oak and think, how strange, how stubborn, that affection always outpaces authority. Later that night, you wander toward a monastery where the bells keep stricter time. Inside, a young monk copies texts by candlelight. He looks up as you enter. "You're not supposed to be here," he says, though his smile betrays no anger. "I heard the bells," you explain. "They ring for matins," he says, "and for memory." He glances at a hidden parchment beside his quill. You glimpse verses not from scripture but from a love poem, smooth cursive, ink still drying. "Whose words are those?" you ask. He flushes, "Mine, but not for me." You nod, understanding. The world divides people neatly into sacred and secular, yet here they mix like pigments in an unfinished painting. The monk sighs. "They say love distracts from devotion. I think it teaches it." You leave him to his copying, the scent of ink and candle wax fatting behind you. Outside, frost glitters on the fields, and you catch yourself humming a tune the minstrel played long ago. At dawn, the market square comes alive. Peddlers sell ribbons blessed by St. Agnes for fidelity and heart-shaped cakes for courage. A boy hawks letters of fortune, tiny scrolls predicting one's romantic fate. You buy one for fun. It reads, "You will walk through many vows, but only remember one." Clever boy. You stop near a stall where a priest debates with a herbalist. "These charms mock holy matrimony," the priest scolds. The herbalist shrugs. "Maybe holy matrimony mocks love." The priest opens his mouth, then closes it again, apparently not equipped for herbal logic. A woman nearby listens, clutching a sprig of thyme in her palm. "My husband's gone to war," she murmurs. "If time keeps him safe, let the bishop complain." You realize then how thin the line is between faith and hope, between miracle and magic. Perhaps the church's greatest discomfort isn't the spell, but the competition. As evening falls, you follow a trail of singing toward a glade. There, villagers dance around a bonfire for St. Valentine's Eve. They toss tokens into the flames, ribbons, flowers, scraps of parchment with names, and each hope that smoke will carry their longing skyward. Someone hands you a cup of honeyed wine. A girl with ash-streaked cheeks grins. "Go on," she says. "Even travelers have hearts." You laugh and toss your fortune scroll into the fire. The smoke curls, golden and sweet. Above, the church bells ring again, their sound mingling with the songs of lovers. In that moment, you realize something simple yet profound. No matter how many rules are written, love always rewrites them. Historians still argue whether medieval people believed more in God or in luck, but watching the flames dance, you suspect they saw no difference at all. When the fire fades, you sit on a fallen log, feeling the last warmth brush your fingers. Somewhere nearby, an owl hoots, a small benediction from the forest. You reach into your pocket and find the old woman's rosemary charm. It smells faintly of home, though you can't say where that is anymore. Maybe it's wherever people keep believing that love, in all its stubborn mess, is worth the trouble. You close your eyes as the embers wink out one by one, the bells fading into the hush of dawn. The dawn arrives quieter this time. No bells, no laughter, no wedding drums, just the soft scrape of your boots over cobblestones slick with rain. The world feels older, like the warmth has drained from its color palette. You sense it even before anyone says it aloud. Something is ending. You pass through a village where the tavern door hangs crooked, where children no longer chase ribbons through the square. The baker's wife tells you the last wedding feast was 2 years ago. The priest says too much dancing brings the plague, she murmurs, dusting her apron. I say too much silence does. And she's right. The joy that once bound communities together, the songs, the ale, the flirtations, has been replaced by whispers and suspicion. You can almost hear it in the air, that brittle fear that laughter might tempt divine punishment. The year is mid-1500s, and England itself feels split in two. The Reformation has turned altars into battlegrounds, love into a matter of doctrine. One village still sings to saints, the next burns their icons. The same vows that once joined hearts now require signatures, seals, and state approval. You stop outside a half-ruined chapel. The roof gapes open like a wound, and inside, a new minister preaches from a wooden box where the altar used to stand. His sermon isn't about joy or devotion, it's about obedience. Marriage, he shouts, is not festivity but discipline. The congregation nods, eyes lowered. No garlands, no musicians, just plain cloth, plain words, plain faces. The bride and groom look more nervous than happy, as though stepping into duty rather than delight. You linger near the door, thinking of all the weddings you've seen before, the garter jokes, the spilled wine, the old women gossiping in corners. This, by contrast, feels like fasting dressed as faith. Historians still argue whether Puritan restraint truly reformed morals or merely dulled them. Some claim it saved England from chaos, others say it starved the human heart. Watching this subdued ceremony, you suspect both might be true. After the final prayer, you walk among the pews. A boy hums softly until his mother hushes him. No worldly songs, she warns. The boy frowns, confused. How can a tune be sinful if it makes people smile? You wish you had an answer for him. Outside, a wind sweeps through the churchyard, scattering dried petals from graves where older lovers lie. You wonder if they'd recognize the world now, if they'd mourn the loss of its laughter. In the tavern that evening, you find an old minstrel plucking half-heartedly at his lute. The strings are frayed, the melody uncertain. No one hires us anymore, he mutters. Feasts are out of fashion. A man can't sing psalms all day. There's only so much mercy in D minor. You buy him a drink and he perks up slightly. Used to be, he says, a wedding could keep a village fed for a week. Ale, meat, stories. Even the poorest man could steal a smile. Now the only thing folks share is worry. He strums a few bars of an old tune, something from your first night in the meadow, and the sound almost startles you. It's like hearing sunlight again. A few heads turn toward him. Someone even taps a foot before catching themselves and stopping. He winks at you. The spirit's still in there, he whispers. Just shy these days. You leave before the curfew bell, stepping into fog that smells faintly of wood smoke and fear. The next village you reach is worse. Doors are marked with chalk crosses. The plague has returned, and weddings have become both miracle and curse. You pass a house where candles burn in every window. Inside, a small wedding takes place despite the sickness. The couple stands 6 feet apart, hands bound by ribbon but faces hidden behind linen veils. Only the priest and 2 witnesses attend. When they kiss, it's through cloth. When they cry, no one wipes the tears. You watch from outside, heart heavy. The groom turns to you briefly, a stranger in the dark, and nods as though asking you to remember them. And you will. You'll remember every vow made under impossible circumstances. Later, you reach London. The city pulses with contradiction, theater and sermon, plague and progress, poetry and paranoia. Love survives here too, but only in coded letters and secret courtyards. You overhear a pair of poets debating in a tavern. one praising the purity of courtly restraint, the other defending passion as divine rebellion. Too much feeling, says the first, makes fools of men. Too little, says the second, makes machines of them. You raise your cup silently to the second man. Some nights you pass through alleys where lovers chalk hearts on walls, tiny acts of defiance against the gray. You see a maid slip a flower into her master, Bible. You hear a soldier whistle a tune that no psalm could carry. Even here, amid reform and ruin, love sneaks in like ivy through broken mortar. One morning a rumor spreads. The king himself has annulled yet another marriage. People whisper, count on fingers, shake heads. If even kings can't keep vows, someone mutters, what chance do we have? But later that day, you stumble upon a humble wedding by the river. A fisherman and a washerwoman stand ankle-deep in mud, holding hands as a friend recites verses from memory. No priest, no gold ring, no parchment, just trust. When they kiss, the geese scatter. You find yourself laughing softly, relieved to hear that sound again. Historians still debate whether the Reformation purified love or politicized it. But as the couple walks barefoot through the reeds, you know one thing for certain: joy is stubborn. Years pass, centuries even, and the grand feasts fade from memory. Yet echoes linger. The garlands reappear as paper decorations. The bonfires turn into candles on wedding cakes. The hand-fasting ribbons become silk ties in modern ceremonies. Even when religion changes, even when empires fall, something essential persists: the human urge to promise. You wander through an old abbey now turned into a ruin. Grass grows where prayers once rose. Carved into a pillar, faint but legible, you read, Thomas and Ali's, bound by hand and heart, 1539. A ghost of a vow carved just before the silence. You rest your hand against the stone and imagine their laughter, the way it must have rung in this hall before time hushed it. As dusk bleeds through the broken roof, you realize you've reached the twilight of the age, the moment before memory becomes history. And even now, as feast days vanish and sermons multiply, something glimmers faintly in the air, like the last candle refusing to go out. Love, perhaps, or maybe just the echo of it. Either way, it's still burning. You find yourself wandering farther from the cities, beyond the smoke and commerce, into a countryside that feels almost untouched by time. Here, the air smells of wet grass and hearth fires, and the soft clatter of a stream over stones blends with distant laughter. You realize this is the quiet age, the one where weddings are smaller, simpler, yet no less profound. A small village celebrates a spring wedding, not with pomp, but with a circle of neighbors and friends. The bride, Alina, wears a simple gown dyed with woad, her hair braided with ribbons plucked from the garden. The groom, Richard, carries a wooden ring polished smooth by hand. There is no feast yet, just bread, cheese, and ale shared among the villagers. You notice how the community's joy suffuses the air like sunlight. Even without grandeur, traditions persist. The bride and groom step over a broomstick for luck. Children scatter petals, just as they did centuries earlier. Someone hums a tune your mind recognizes from the distant past, a melody you first heard under oak trees with pranks, ribbons, and honeyed wine. The echoes of medieval joy are alive, adapted, and reborn. You observe a peculiar custom. A small box of herbs and charms is placed beside the couple, each token representing a wish or blessing from a different villager. A sprig of thyme for courage, a coin for prosperity, a lock of hair for fidelity. Even the smallest gesture carries history within it. Historians still argue whether such gifts are symbolic superstition or genuine tools for marital harmony, but their effect is unmistakable: community and love intertwine. Later, as the sun dips behind distant hills, a young boy tugs at your sleeve. "Do you think love is magic?" he asks, wide-eyed. You smile, recalling all the weddings, pranks, charms, and vows you've witnessed across villages, towns, and noble halls. "Sometimes it is," you answer softly. "Sometimes it's stubbornness, patience, or courage disguised as magic." The boy nods solemnly, eyes reflecting the last light of day. Meanwhile, the bride and groom dance barefoot in the grass, their laughter blending with the hum of evening insects. You notice that the old pranks still persist. Someone tips a bucket of water just to startle the couple. A dog steals a ribbon, and an old woman quietly shakes her head, laughing. It is chaotic, imperfect, joyous, just as life should be. You wander to the edge of the green, where the stream glistens under the first stars. Here, you reflect on everything: the noble halls and their strategic unions, the guild marriages of parchment and coin, the whispered charms, the handfastings, the prayers, and the Reformation. Across centuries, a single thread connects all of them: the human need to bind hearts, to promise, to celebrate connection in a world that is often unkind and fleeting. You settle on a fallen log, letting the night wrap around you like a soft cloak. The fireflies blink gently, the crickets chirp in a lazy rhythm, and the last warmth of the day fades into a tender hush. You breathe deeply, carrying the echoes of every song, every prank, every whispered vow. It is a lullaby of humanity itself, stitched from laughter, tears, and hope. And as you close your eyes beneath the starlit sky, you realize marriage in every form you've witnessed is a story of courage and mischief, magic and pragmatism, devotion and rebellion. A story meant to be remembered, retold, and cherished. Some vows fade, some survive, and some live on forever in the hearts of those who recall them. You drift with the stream's gentle murmur, with the village lights dimming behind you, and the air filled with soft exhalations of the earth. Somewhere, a bell tolls far away, blending with the whisper of leaves. Every echo carries the laughter and longing of the past, guiding you gently into sleep. Now the day has fully released its hold. You feel the weight of every story settle into your chest like a soft, familiar quilt. The laughter of pranks, the whispered charms, the solemn vows, they all swirl together and slowly fade, leaving only the quiet warmth of memory. The fields you walked, the halls you glimpsed, the bonfires and candles, they are distant now, as though the world itself exhales in relief. You let the gentle hum of the night carry you, the soft pulse of crickets and wind blending into a lullaby meant for you alone. Every bride and groom, every rogue, every child scattering petals, each presence becomes a light, a tiny flicker guiding you toward calm. The stories you followed, the echoes of centuries, now sit quietly behind your eyes like stars fading at dawn. Imagine yourself walking slowly through the green, feeling the texture of grass under your feet, the smell of hearth fires carried by a cool breeze, the faint tang of rose petals crushed by passing feet. Every sound, every scent, every memory is softened, slowed, folded into a gentle rhythm that rocks you toward rest. The world feels still, patient, and safe. Breathe in, let it linger. Breathe out and release the tension of wandering through history. You are here now, enveloped in a calm that even time cannot disturb. Let the warmth of remembered joy and tender mischief soothe the edges of your mind. Let every story, the laughter, the vows, the whispered charms, fade like a candle's glow, leaving a gentle hush in its wake. And as your eyes grow heavy, carry one thought with you. Love, in all its forms, is enduring. Even when feasts end, when bells fall silent, when the world moves on, the echoes remain, soft and steady, guiding you toward dreams that are just as bright as the lives that lived before you. Sweet dreams.